The soul that sees beauty may sometimes walk alone. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Last time we stood at the very edge of nothing and watched as God spoke the universe into existence. We saw light tear through eternal darkness. We watched continents rise from the sea, trees burst from bare ground, creatures fill the oceans and skies. We witnessed 6 days of creation, so breathtaking, so precise, so impossibly perfect, that the only reasonable response was silence and wonder. And at the very end of that 6th day, God did something he had never done before. He leaned down close to the dust of the ground, and he breathed. And a man opened his eyes for the very first time. We ended there at the moment of beginning, but today we go deeper. Today we step inside that story. Today we ask not just what happened, but what it meant, and what it still means for you, right now, in the life you are living today. Because the story of Adam is not just the story of one man who lived at the beginning of time. It is the story of every man, every woman, every human being who has ever drawn breath on this earth. It is your story. It is my story. And it begins in a garden. Picture the world as it was on that morning, the morning after the 6th day of creation, when everything was still new and untouched and unmarked by any shadow of failure or pain or loss. There were no ruins, no graveyards, no hospitals, no locked doors or broken relationships or wars or famines. There was only a world exactly as God intended it to be, whole, beautiful, overflowing with life and color and sound and the unmistakable signature of a creator who loved what he had made. The rivers ran clear and cold over smooth stones. The trees were heavy with fruit in every color imaginable. The air was filled with the songs of birds that had never known fear. Lions lay down in the shade without hunger in their eyes. Every creature moved through the world in its proper place, doing exactly what it was designed to do, in harmony with everything around it. And in the center of all of this, there was a garden that God himself had planted, a garden called Eden. The word Eden in the original Hebrew carries the meaning of delight, not just pleasure in the shallow sense of the word, not merely the satisfaction of a good meal or a comfortable bed, but delight in the deepest, most complete sense imaginable. The kind of delight that fills you so completely, there is no room left for wanting anything else. The kind of delight that makes you stop in the middle of whatever you are doing and simply breathe and say, this is enough. This is more than enough. This is everything. That was Eden. A place designed by God specifically to be the dwelling place of his most beloved creation, the creature made in his own image. A place where every tree was pleasant to look at and good for food. A place watered by rivers flowing in 4 directions, as if the garden itself was the center of the whole world, because in a very real sense, it was. And in that garden, God placed the man he had formed from the dust of the ground. Adam, the first human being, the first pair of eyes to ever look out at a world designed specifically to be looked at. The first mind to ever form a thought, ask a question, feel wonder, experience beauty. The first heart to ever beat with the capacity for love, for relationship, for meaning. Adam stood in the middle of Eden and looked around, and everything he saw was good. Not good in the ordinary sense we use that word today, the way we say, a meal was good, or the weather was good. Good in the original, deep, theological sense of the word, aligned with the character and the will of God, functioning exactly as it was created to function, bearing the fingerprints of a holy and loving creator on every surface and in every corner. But before we go any further, I want to pause here and think carefully about something that we very often rush past when we read this part of the story. We tend to focus so much on what came later, on the fall, on the serpent, on the forbidden fruit, that we forget to stop and fully appreciate what was here first. Before the fall, there was a garden. Before the brokenness, there was wholeness. Before the exile, there was a home. Before the tears, there was laughter. Before the longing, there was fulfillment. And I think it matters deeply that we understand this, because the entire arc of the biblical story, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, is not a story about God rescuing a mistake. It is a story about God restoring something beautiful that was lost. And you cannot fully appreciate what is being restored unless you first understand what was there before it was broken. So let us stay here for a moment. Let us breathe the air of Eden. Let us look at Adam as he was not as he would become, but as he was in those first moments of his existence. created by God, placed in a garden by God, given a purpose by God, loved completely and without reservation by God, walking in daily, unbroken, face-to-face fellowship with the one who had formed him with his own hands and breathed life into him with his own breath. This was not a distant, transactional relationship. This was not the relationship of a craftsman to an object he has manufactured and set aside. This was the relationship of a father to a son, of a creator to a beloved creation, of a God who made a being capable of knowing him because he wanted to be known. Now, God gave Adam something that no other creature had been given. He gave him a job, not a punishment, remember. This is before the fall, before anything went wrong. This was a gift. God placed Adam in the garden to work it and take care of it, to cultivate it, to tend it, to be a steward of the beautiful world that had been entrusted to him. And this tells us something profound about what it means to be human, something that our culture today has largely forgotten. Work is not a curse. Work is not something imposed on us as a result of our failure. Work, in its original form, in the form God designed it to be, is a calling. It is the expression of our God-given creativity and capability. It is participation in the ongoing care of a world that God loves. It is one of the primary ways in which we bear his image, because God himself worked for 6 days to bring this world into being, and he looked at that work and called it very good. When we work with our hands, with our minds, with our gifts, when we create and build and grow and cultivate, we are doing something that reflects the very nature of the God who made us. But there was something else God gave Adam in that garden, something even more significant than a place to live or a purpose to pursue. God gave Adam words. He brought every creature of the field and every bird of the air to Adam, and he let Adam name them, every single one. Think about what that means. God, who had already named the light and the darkness and the sky and the land, now stepped back and gave that naming authority to the man he had made. He did not tell Adam what to call them. He did not suggest names or correct the ones Adam chose. He simply brought them before Adam and waited, and Adam named them, every creature, every bird, every beast of the field. One by one, Adam looked at them and called them by name, and whatever Adam called each living creature, that was its name. This is one of the most remarkable passages in all of Scripture, and it is one that we almost always read too quickly, because what God was doing here was not just giving Adam a task to complete. He was establishing something fundamental about the nature of human beings and our relationship with the rest of creation. He was saying, you are not just another creature. You are not simply one more piece of the natural world, moving through it by instinct alone. You are a being with language, with reason, with the authority to impose order and meaning on the world around you. You are a being made in the image of a God who spoke the world into existence, and so you, too, have been given the power of words, the power to name, the power to define, the power to make meaning. And as Adam named the animals, something else was happening. God was watching, not passively, not indifferently. He was watching with the tender attention of a father observing a beloved child discovering his own capabilities. And in that watching, God saw something. He saw that among all the creatures Adam named, there was not one that was his equal. Not one that could look back at him with the same depth of understanding. Not one that could speak to him, reason with him, challenge him, comfort him, share his joys and his sorrows and his hopes and his fears. Every creature was good. Every creature had its place and its purpose. But none of them could be what Adam needed most. And so God said something that stopped the whole narrative in its tracks, something that stood in absolute contrast to every other evaluation he had made in the 6 days of creation. He said, "It is not good." Those 4 words carry enormous weight. In all of Genesis chapter 1, God had looked at everything he made and declared it good. The light was good. The land and the sea were good. The plants and the trees were good. The sun and the moon and the stars were good. The creatures of the sea and the sky were good. The animals of the land were good. And the creation of man, male and female, in the image of God was very good. That word very was the highest possible evaluation, the declaration of absolute completeness and perfection. And yet here, just a few verses later, before anything has gone wrong, before any sin has entered the picture, God looks at Adam alone in the most perfect garden imaginable, surrounded by the most beautiful creation ever made, walking in unbroken fellowship with the Creator of the universe, and God says, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Do not rush past this. Do not minimize it. Do not reduce it to something sentimental or merely romantic. What God was declaring here was not just that Adam needed a companion in the ordinary sense of the word. He was declaring something about the nature of human beings that goes all the way to the core of what we are. We are relational beings. We are beings made for community. We are beings who, no matter how much beauty surrounds us, no matter how much purpose we have, no matter how close our walk with God, are still incomplete without genuine human connection. We were designed for relationship. We were wired for it from the very beginning by the God who is himself, a relational, being Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in perfect, eternal communion. The longing you feel when you are isolated, the ache of loneliness that no amount of achievement or success or pleasure can fully quiet. The deep, persistent hunger for someone who truly knows you and truly loves you, that is not a weakness. That is not a flaw. That is the image of God in you, crying out for what it was always designed to have. And so God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. Not a natural sleep, not the kind of sleep that comes after a long day of work when the body is tired and the mind begins to slow. A deep sleep, a divinely induced, purposeful unconsciousness that allowed God to do something that had never been done before and would never be done again. While Adam lay still and unaware, God reached into the man's side and took from him a rib. One rib, a single piece of the man, drawn from the place closest to his heart. And from that rib, God built a woman. Built, the original Hebrew word here, is fascinating. It is not the same word used for forming Adam from the dust. When God made Adam, he formed him. The word suggests a potter shaping clay, a craftsman working with raw material. But when God made the woman, he built her a word that suggests careful, deliberate, architectural construction, as though God took extra care with this one, as though he gave even more thought and intention to her design, as though she was, in some meaningful sense, the crowning achievement of the entire work of creation. And when Adam woke up and God brought the woman to him, something happened that had never happened before in all of creation. A human being experienced recognition, not the recognition of a familiar face or a known name, a deeper recognition. The recognition of something that completes you. The recognition of your own self reflected back at you in someone else. Adam looked at the woman standing before him, and something in him knew, with absolute certainty, beyond the reach of any doubt. This is the one. And the words that came out of his mouth were not a careful evaluation or a reasoned assessment. They were poetry. The very first poem ever spoken by a human being, erupting spontaneously from the depths of a man who, for the first time in his existence, was not alone. This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, at last. That word "at last" is perhaps the most revealing word in the whole passage. At last implies waiting. At last implies longing. At last implies a space that existed before it was filled, a hollow that had been present, unnamed and unrecognized, perhaps, all along. Adam had walked through the most perfect garden ever created. He had named every creature God brought before him. He had tended and cultivated the earth God had entrusted to him. He had enjoyed unbroken fellowship with his Creator. And through all of it, something had been missing. He may not have known what to call it. He may not have been able to articulate the shape of the emptiness. But when God brought the woman to him, he knew, with the knowledge that goes deeper than thought, deeper than language, deeper than conscious understanding, he knew that the missing piece had arrived. At last. This is the foundation of marriage as God designed it. Not a social contract, not a legal arrangement, not merely a practical partnership for the purpose of raising children and sharing resources. A sacred union between two people who, in finding each other, find a reflection of themselves. A union that God himself instituted and blessed in the garden before any human priest or government or religious institution existed to sanction it. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother. Even though Adam had no father and mother to leave, God was already looking forward to every marriage that would ever follow this first one, and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. One flesh. Not two people living side by side in comfortable proximity. not two individuals who have agreed to coordinate their lives for mutual benefit. 1. A union so deep and so complete that it mirrors, in some mysterious and beautiful way, the very nature of the God in whose image they were both made. And they were both naked, and they were not ashamed. That single sentence at the end of Genesis chapter 2 is one of the most heartbreaking sentences in the entire Bible. Heartbreaking, not because of what it says, but because of what it implies about everything that came after. They were naked and not ashamed. No hiding, no pretending, no carefully constructed personas or carefully maintained reputations. No armor, no walls, no performance. Just two human beings standing before each other and before God in total transparency and total vulnerability and feeling nothing but the warm, uncomplicated peace of being completely known and completely loved. That is what human beings were made for. That is the condition of the human heart as God designed it to be. Open, unguarded, fully present, fully known, fully loved. Think about how rare that is today. Think about how much energy we spend every single day maintaining the image we want other people to see, how carefully we curate what we share and what we hide, how exhausting it is to carry the weight of all the things we are afraid people would think of us if they really knew us, how deep the longing is underneath all the performance and the pretending to simply be seen. Really seen, not the version of yourself you present to the world, but the actual you, the messy, complicated, contradictory, beautiful, broken, longing, hoping, fearing, wondering you. The you that exists beneath all the layers. And to be seen like that and loved, not despite what is seen, but because of it. Not with conditions attached, but freely and completely, and without reservation. That is what Adam and Eve had in the garden. Perfect transparency, perfect intimacy, perfect love. And it was not naive. It was not the innocence of people who simply did not know any better. It was the innocence of people who had not yet chosen to be anything other than what they were made to be. They were whole. They were free. They were home. But I need to tell you something that makes this picture even more profound and more poignant. Because it is not just Adam and Eve who had this kind of relationship with each other. The Bible tells us that they walked with God in the garden in the cool of the day. God came to them. He walked with them. He talked with them. Not through a prophet or a priest or a sacred text or a religious institution, face to face, in the unhurried intimacy of an evening walk through a garden between a father and the children he loved. This was the original design. This was what human life was always supposed to look like. Not striving toward God from a distance, not trying to earn his favor or appease his anger, not performing religious rituals in an attempt to bridge a yawning gap between the human and the divine, but simply walking with him, talking with him, knowing him and being known by him, in the easy, unforced, unhurried way that two friends walk together at the end of the day. The deepest longing of the human heart is not for wealth or success or pleasure or power or even for human love, as beautiful and necessary as all of those things are. The deepest longing of the human heart is for God, for the walking together, the face-to-face, the known and loved, completely that was lost when Adam and Eve chose to leave the garden behind. Every religion in human history, every spiritual tradition on every continent, in every era, every philosopher and every poet who has ever wrestled with the great questions of existence, they are all, in one way or another, reaching toward the same thing. The thing that was in the garden, the thing that was lost, the thing that the rest of the biblical story is entirely about recovering. Because here is what I want you to understand as we close this episode and look forward to the ones that are coming. The story of Adam is not a story about the past. It is a story about now. It is a story about you. When you feel that inexplicable sense of longing, that feeling that something is missing, that you were made for something more than this, that the life you are living is somehow not quite the life you were designed to live, that is not delusion, that is not weakness. That is the echo of Eden in your soul. That is the memory of what you were made to be, calling out to you from beneath all the noise and busyness and distraction of modern life. You were made for a garden. You were made for walking with God in the cool of the evening. You were made for perfect transparency and perfect love and perfect wholeness and perfect peace. And the fact that you do not have those things yet, the fact that they feel distant and elusive and sometimes almost mythical, does not mean they are impossible. It means you are living in the middle of the story, not at the end. The garden was real. The wholeness was real. The walking with God was real. And the entire rest of the biblical story, every prophet and king and miracle and sacrifice and promise and fulfillment and resurrection that we are going to walk through together over the course of this series, is the story of a God who refused to let his children stay lost. A God who, even in the moment of the greatest loss, was already setting in motion the plan that would bring them home. A Savior who existed before time began, prepared before the foundation of the world, who would one day walk into the broken garden of human history and say, "I have come to take you home." But before we get to that, before we can fully appreciate the rescue, we need to understand the wreck. We need to walk through what happened next. We need to step into the shadows that fell over the garden on a day when a serpent spoke and two people listened and the whole world changed forever. That is where we are going in the next episode. And I promise you, it is one of the most important stories you will ever hear. Because it is not just a story about what went wrong. It is a story about why everything in your life feels the way it does sometimes. It is a story about why the garden feels so far away. And it is a story that already contains, hidden inside it, like a seed buried in dark soil, the first whisper of hope that the garden might one day be regained. Adam stood in Eden and named the animals. He held Eve's hand and walked with God in the cool of the evening. He breathed air that had never been breathed before. He saw colors that human eyes have never seen since. He knew peace that no human being born after him has ever fully known. And he had no idea, not the faintest shadow of a suspicion, that tomorrow was going to be the last day of that world. That tomorrow, everything was going to change. That tomorrow, the serpent would come. And the beautiful, terrible, heartbreaking, hope-filled story of the human race would truly begin. Stay with me. The story is just getting started. See you in episode 3, The Serpent and the Forbidden Fruit, the most dangerous conversation in history.